Hello, everyone. I'm Ivana. My mother handed me a faded old dress and said, "You're marrying him." No questions. I didn't even know his last name. I didn't have a cake with my name on it. They called it a wedding. To me, it felt more like a funeral. And just when they thought they'd gotten rid of me, I found out the man they forced me to marry was richer than everyone in that room combined. So this is the real story of what happened and why I never say goodbye. Have you ever been told where you belong by people who never knew your worth? Tell me where you're reading from. I read every comment. The morning my mother gave me the dress, its hem was still damp. A shapeless thing, pale yellow sleeves, uneven collar, crooked like it was sewn in a hurry, by someone who didn't much like me. She didn't meet my eyes when she said, "You're marrying that man next Saturday." No arguments. That was it. No, how do you feel? No, are you ready? Not even a congratulations. Just an order dressed up as a blessing. I was 30, but in her tone, I was still a child. A burden she couldn't wait to hand off. My father sat in his armchair as always, eyes glued to the local paper, like it mattered more than my life being tossed away. The only sound in the room was the uneven clatter of the ceiling fan. And my sister Vera's giggle, not even hiding her smirk. "Don't forget to wash your hair," she said. "You don't want to scare him off." I stood there holding the dress still damp, still unwanted, like it could drip all the disappointments I'd been taught to swallow over the years. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the obedient one, the one who said yes, Mama, and yes, Papa, even when it hurt. I gave up a full scholarship to stay home and care for Aunt Loretta when she was sick. My sister got to finish school, move away, live her life. I stayed in the crumbling house with peeling paint on the porch columns and dreams peeling off my ribs. In this family, silence was mistaken for gratitude. I didn't speak when my mother handed me off like an old pair of shoes. I didn't speak when she said, "This is where girls like you belong." As if I was being returned to a factory with a discount sticker on my soul. The man Lazaro had come by twice. Once to fix the church's plumbing, once to drop off a donation basket. I knew nothing about him except that he was a handyman and didn't talk much. That was good enough for them. A quiet man for a quiet girl, no questions needed. The wedding happened 5 days later. It was held in a small community chapel where the carpet smelled of mildew and the pews creaked like they were crying. No flowers, no music, no laughing cousins from out of town. Just a half-asleep pastor and a few quiet spectators who came more out of habit than celebration. Someone handed out a folded program. My name was misspelled on the cover. Ivana Grace Thompson. I pointed it out to my mother. She glanced at it, shrugged. Doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter anymore. No speeches, no toasts, no photos, just a nod from the pastor and a "you can go now." It sounded more like a sentence than a blessing. After signing the register, I overheard my mother whisper to Vera, her voice cutting through the stale air like a blade. Thank God we finally got rid of her. That was it. No hug, no ride home, no, we'll miss you. They watched me climb into Lazaro's dusty pickup truck, its door squeaking as I shut it. The borrowed white dress, cheap and tight on the arms, crumpled under the seatbelt as he started the engine. We didn't speak. The gravel road stretched out like a scar between the church and the rest of the world. I clutched my purse, though it held almost nothing. No phone, no wallet, just a white cotton handkerchief with an E embroidered in one corner. Aunt Loretta gave it to me before she passed. She always said, "No matter what they take from you, keep something with your name on it." I gripped that handkerchief as the truck rattled forward, kicking up red dust behind us. I looked out the window but saw nothing. No trees, no mailboxes, no sky. Just my mother's voice in my head. "This is where girls like you belong." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Not in front of a stranger I was now bound to by law. Not in a dress someone else chose. Not because they'd won. No. If I cried, it would be in silence. And later, Lazaro drove hands steady on the wheel, eyes straight ahead. He wasn't unkind, just unreadable. I wondered what he thought of me. I wondered if he knew I had no choice. I wondered if he cared. I wanted to ask, do you think I deserve this? But I couldn't get the words out. Instead, I sat still, let the ride carry me, and counted the turns in the road like they were stitches I could one day unpick. That was the day I buried my voice in a wedding dress I didn't choose, and I didn't say another word for the next 4 hours. The truck swayed along narrow roads winding through forests and empty fields. The crunch of tires on gravel was the only sound between us. I sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring at moss-draped trees sliding by slowly like a dream. He drove steadily, eyes on the road, hands firm at 10 and 2. Lazaro, my husband. We hadn't spoken more than 10 words to each other. I didn't know what town we were headed to. Didn't ask. I wasn't ready to care. He glanced at me once, then back at the road. Not pity, just curiosity. Maybe like he was trying to guess what kind of storm he'd married. This wasn't a honeymoon. It was exile. Hours passed and trees gave way to signs of life. Low fences, neat lawns, pastel window frames on small houses. Savannah, Georgia. I saw the name on a road sign just as the sun dipped below the horizon. He turned onto a lane behind a large white-painted house and parked beside a small guest cottage nestled in a garden that smelled faintly of rosemary and rain. The porch light glowed. The steps didn't creak. The windows were clean. I expected mildew and neglect. Instead, I found lavender and quiet. Lazaro got out first, walked around and opened my door without a word. I followed him inside, clutching my purse like it was the last piece of the girl I used to be. The cottage had 1 bedroom, a small living room, and a narrow kitchen. Everything looked secondhand but cared for. Towels folded neatly, floors swept, dishes dry on the rack. The ceiling fan's soft hum stirred the warm air. "You can take the bedroom," he said. "I'll sleep out here if you don't mind." He didn't wait for a reply, just stepped past me and opened a drawer, pulling out a few tools. Then he knelt in front of a loose cabinet and started tightening its hinges. The quiet unnerved me. Not the tense kind I grew up with, full of accusing glances and guilt, but a gentle quiet like it was giving me room to breathe. He made a simple meal, eggs, toast, a slice of avocado. I waited for him to say a prayer or hand me a plate. Instead, he just said, "There's water in the fridge. You don't have to talk if you don't want to." I sat at the table. I ate, and for the first time in days, maybe longer, my breath came steady. Not a gas for survival, but air. I was allowed to breathe. He fixed that cabinet, then folded a dish towel, then stepped outside without a word. I sat in the chair, fork still on the plate, looking out the window where the sunset bruised the sky purple. That night, after a shower and slipping into an old t-shirt he'd left folded on the bed, I turned on my phone. One message from my mother. "Don't come back. It's done. We've moved on." 7 words. No punctuation. "No love, Mama." I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone or scream or ask why. I just powered it off and set it face down on the nightstand. They'd cut the cord so cleanly, I wondered if I'd ever mattered to them. I lay on the edge of the bed, too tired to crawl under the covers, still half-dressed. The embroidered handkerchief clutched like a rosary. My mind kept waiting for something bad to happen. A knock, a shouted insult, a slammed cabinet. But nothing came. The room was cool. The sheets smelled of sunlight. I didn't dream of flowers or forgiveness that night. I didn't dream at all. I just slept, and that was enough. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the room like warm milk. I sat up slowly, the ache in my body less sharp than before. My eyes stung, but they were dry. The smell of toast reached me before I left the bedroom. On the kitchen table was a plate of scrambled eggs and buttered toast. Steam curled from a coffee mug beside it. Lazaro was outside in the garden, barefoot on a small patch of earth behind the cottage. He watered tomato plants with slow, steady motions, like it was something holy. For a moment, I just watched him. The way he moved was purposeful but unhurried. No heaviness. No tension in his shoulders. Just a man, a watering can, and the quiet earth. I stepped onto the porch. "Thank you," I said, my voice rough from sleep or disuse. "You don't owe me anything," he replied, setting the can down. "Eat while it's hot." I stood there a second longer, then went back to the table. My stomach growled. But something else stirred deeper, a kindness I couldn't yet name, but maybe, just maybe, I'd figure out. I sat in front of the plate, steam rising gently from the toast. I didn't realize how hungry I was until the smell hit me. Eggs, pepper, butter, just starting to cool. But it wasn't just the food, it was the note. Folded neatly beside the fork, written in plain ballpoint. "Saw your bottle was low." A new shampoo bottle sat next to it on the table. Something in me paused. He didn't ask if I needed it. He didn't ask if he could buy it. He just noticed. Noticed without commentary, without expecting praise, without making it a transaction. My fingers lingered on the note longer than I meant to. It's hard to trust gentle hands when the ones before left bruises you had to cover with makeup. I pushed the plate aside, gently, stood and walked to the window. He was back in the garden, quietly turning soil with a hand trowel. This man moved like he didn't need an audience. 3 days had passed since I arrived, each one without conflict. Lazaro never invaded my space. He knocked before entering the hallway, asked no questions about my past, and didn't fill the silence with platitudes. He cooked, cleaned, fixed a loose bathroom drawer like it was a sacred task. But something was off. It started with his tools. One afternoon, I reached under the sink for a sponge and saw his toolbox tucked neatly there. Gleaming stainless steel, a Makita drill, a Bosch laser measure, custom hex keys. Not the kind of thing a part-time handyman in this part of Georgia would splurge on. Then the stove. It gleamed like something from a high-end apartment magazine. I'd only seen one like it once in a Charleston showroom. At least $5,000. High-grade stainless 6 burners. A convection oven, even a warming drawer. It sat in our tiny kitchen like a grand piano in a roadside diner. When I asked, he just glanced over his shoulder and said, "Came with the house, didn't it?" And I came with a fairy tale. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a car starting earlier than usual. I peeked through the blinds. Lazaro had swapped the dusty pickup for a charcoal gray sedan, sleek and silent. He wore a button-down shirt and dark slacks, no tool belt, no paint stains. He was gone before I could ask. And something in me stirred restless. So I dressed quickly, tied my hair back, and followed 10 minutes behind. I kept my distance, careful not to get too close. The streets grew busier as we reached downtown Savannah. Victorian houses gave way to brownstones, then glass towers reflecting the sky. He turned into the underground parking of a high-rise I'd never noticed. Sleek all-black glass and metal edges. The kind of place where men in tailored suits drank $6 coffee and talked about hedge funds or hostile takeovers. I stopped on the sidewalk across the street and waited. And then there he was, Lazaro, my husband. He walked through the automatic doors like he belonged there. No toolbox, no coveralls, just quiet confidence. I stood frozen. What kind of handyman walks into a building where people wear Rolexes and talk about mergers? That question haunted me the whole way back. That night I cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just pan-fried chicken and green beans. I needed to keep my hands busy while my mind spun. He came home late, smelling faintly of cologne. Not sweat, but still greeted me with that quiet nod, kicking off his shoes at the door like always. Over dinner, I finally broke the silence. "You said you fix things." "What things in that downtown building?" He paused, looked at me, waiting. He set his fork down, smiled faintly. "I fix what people break when they forget what matters." That was it. No elaboration, no deflection. I didn't press. I just nodded and ate. That night I lay awake longer than usual. I stared at the ceiling fan, listening to its soft hum above. He didn't make sense. And maybe that's why I hadn't left. The world I came from always made sense. Cruelty was passed down like an heirloom silence, mistaken for love, shame woven into every Sunday dress. But this didn't add up. This man gave me a guest house, $1,000 stove shampoo like it had my name on it, and never once asked for anything back. It made me feel strange, so when he handed me a cup of tea the next morning, I didn't hesitate. I smiled and said thank you. I didn't know what he was hiding. I thought watching him sip tea quietly on the porch. But for the first time, I didn't want to run. I wanted to wait. Even though Lazaro didn't stop me. That morning, he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes steady as ever. You don't owe them anything, Ivana. I zipped up my dress slowly, letting the words hang in the quiet room. Maybe not, I said, but I still want to believe they'll look me in the eye this time. He didn't nod or shake his head, just stepped aside to let me pass. The drive from Savannah to Mississippi felt longer this time, though it was only 5 hours. My hands were cold on the wheel, despite the sun. Lazaro offered to come. I said no. It's just a small party for my sister, I explained. No need to make a fuss. But the moment I pulled up to the house, my childhood home now painted a trendy pale gray with crisp white trim, I knew something was wrong. 3 rental cars were parked out front and a valet in a vest. A valet in Jackson. I walked inside, music, humming, glasses clinking, the unmistakable smell of catered food. The interior had been redone modern white cold. No more lace doilies, no armchairs, no faded portraits of my grandparents. My mother saw me, or rather saw through me. Oh, she said, her voice flat. You're here. No hug, no cheek kiss? She waved vaguely toward the back porch. They're all out there. Don't make a scene showing up. Don't make a scene showing up. At an event I was invited to. I walked through the living room. No one turned. No one called my name. A woman glanced at my shoes and whispered something to her friend. I clutched the small, carefully wrapped gift. I'd spent a week embroidering a linen wall hanging for my sister, her favorite scripture stitched by hand. I don't even remember what it said anymore, just that I picked the thread to match her old bedroom curtains. Out in the yard, my sister stood near a glass table piled with gift bags, Gucci Louis Vuitton sacks. I set my handmade gift beside them. It looked out of place, like me. She turned, tossing her hair over her shoulder, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Didn't think you'd actually show. I was invited, I said, voice even. Technically. She wore white like this was her wedding, not just a promotion party. Someone handed her a flute of champagne. She didn't offer me one. Eventually, the crowd hushed for the big announcement. A 2-tiered cake covered in pink sugar roses. At the top, gold lettering, "Congratulations to our beautiful firstborn." I blinked. Just that. Not our daughters. Not even her name. Just firstborn. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. Someone laughed. Yeah, you're not the one people came to celebrate, my sister said sweetly, and a few guests nearby chuckled. I stepped back, bumping into a server. I mumbled an apology, though he barely noticed. Later, an old friend of my mother's approached her by the punch table. She smiled, nodded, holding a paper plate of cake. You must be so proud of your girls, she said. My mother didn't hesitate. I only have one daughter. The other was a lesson we had to learn the hard way. My body stilled. I didn't drop my plate. I didn't run or scream. I just stood there, my senses muffled like I was underwater. I saw a teenager snapping photos with her phone. I heard the hiss of a soda machine and the hum of summer insects outside. I carried my plate to the kitchen, quietly, carefully set it in the sink, and walked away. In the hallway, I heard my mother's voice again. Low but not soft. She's just a charity case. You'll see. This won't last. The hallway blurred. My feet moved on instinct. I didn't know if I was shaking with anger or grief, but I knew I couldn't stay another second. I stepped onto the porch, the cool air a relief, leaving behind the lights. The laughter, the cake that never had my name. I didn't cry, but something in me tore open that night. The air in Mississippi was heavy, but the silence in Savannah was heavier. When I got home, the porch light was still on. Lazaro must have left it for me. I stepped inside quietly, like I didn't want the walls to hear. The warmth that once greeted me felt absent, now replaced by something too still, too polite. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, it just reminds you how loud your thoughts can be. There's a silence that heals, I remember thinking. And there's a silence that says you don't belong anywhere. I hung up my bag and went straight to the back room, not bothering with the lights. Lazaro had left a folded blanket on the bed's edge and a cup of tea still warm. Chamomile, the kind I like. He always remembered. I didn't drink it. That night I didn't say much. I didn't explain what happened. Lazaro didn't ask. Instead, he made dinner. Something simple: roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, a salad with a few peach slices. He set the plate down without a word and sat across from me reading something on his phone. No questions, no performance. You didn't have to go, he said finally, not looking up. I know, I replied. He stood, walked to the kitchen, poured the rest of his tea down the sink. You don't have to explain anything, but you're not a ghost here. You're allowed to exist. That made it worse, because if he'd pushed, if he'd demanded answers, stormed in, accused me of dragging old pain into his tidy life, maybe I'd have yelled. Instead, I just nodded and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay there, eyes open, replaying every word from my mother's lips. She's just a charity case. You'll see. This won't last. The next morning, I was folding the blanket when Lazaro tapped lightly on the doorframe. Got an invitation for you, he said, holding a cream-colored envelope. Probably for both of us. It was thick, formal paper. A dinner at the main house, Mr. Whitmore, the landlord. Saturday, 7 p. Nah. Fancy, I said, frowning. What's the occasion? He shrugged. Not sure. Maybe just neighborly courtesy. I didn't answer right away. Saturday came fast. I wore a deep blue dress, nothing flashy, just neat. Lazaro wore a blazer I hadn't seen before, charcoal sharp at the shoulders. We walked across the lawn together, and for a moment I thought maybe things are shifting. The Whitmore house was grand, not ostentatious, but the kind of wealth that's old polished wood. Silent staff portraits that seemed to breathe. A woman in pearls opened the door. Mr. Lazaro, she said brightly, her eyes flicking past me. Oh, we weren't expecting an extra guest. That pause like a silent slap. My stomach nodded. As champagne flutes clinked and laughter rose from every corner, I slipped out to the back porch. I didn't want to hover. I just needed a moment. And then I heard it. She's just a +1, right? A voice whispered behind a screen. I mean, we only invited Mr. Lazaro. She wasn't expected. I didn't stay to hear more. I found the powder room and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror, skin too pale under the lights, eyes too tired, shoulders braced for another hit. I pulled the handkerchief from my bag, the one with the E. Am I invisible even here? I whispered. No dramatics. I didn't throw anything. I didn't sob. But the tears came. And this time I let them fall. I sat on the floor, knees pulled up, and cried the way you cry when there's nothing left to pretend. When the storm settled, I fixed my face and walked out. Dinner went on like nothing happened. I smiled, said thank you, raised my glass. That night back at the cottage, I stood at the sink, wiping off makeup. When Lazaro walked in, I didn't turn. If you want a clean life, I said softly, you can have it. I won't be the stain they warned you about. He didn't speak. Not that night. But I was learning that silence sometimes carries the weight of a choice not yet spoken. I didn't wait for his answer that night. After I said I won't be the stain. they warned you about? I walked to the bedroom, into the dark, into the quiet. But quiet doesn't mean still. I didn't sleep. My body lay still, but my mind walked, questioned, relived. That night wasn't heavy with sadness. It was bitter sharp. By morning, the air outside was cool. Spring in Savannah carried a strange sweetness, like jasmine trying to grow through cement. I stood in the kitchen pouring coffee when Lazaro walked in, buttoning his cuffs. "You're up early," he said. "Haven't been sleeping much lately." He grabbed a banana, peeled it without looking at me. "There's another dinner at the Whitmores tonight. They asked if I was bringing anyone." I turned skeptical. "They asked about me." He paused. "They said to bring a guest. I gave them your name." I sipped my coffee. "That's not the same." "No," he agreed. "But it's a start." That evening, I stood in front of the small hallway mirror, tying my hair into a simple bun. No makeup, no jewelry, just the embroidered handkerchief tucked neatly in my dress sleeve. Navy dress, plain but dignified. I didn't dress to impress. I dressed to remind myself who I was. As we approached the mansion, my stomach tightened. Not fear, but clarity. "They don't have to expect me to exist," I muttered. Lazaro glanced over but said nothing, just held the door as we arrived. Inside, marble floors gleamed under soft chandeliers. A woman in a black dress hurried over, clipboard in hand. "Oh, thank God, Mr. Lazaro," she chirped. "We need help setting out appetizers. We're behind." She turned to me, not even asking who I was, and handed me a tray. "Just arrange them neatly, napkins under each." I looked at Lazaro, but he'd already been pulled aside by the host. I could have corrected her. I could have set the tray down, but I didn't. I took it, walked to the kitchen, and arranged the shrimp with deliberate care. Rose precise, a sprig of parsley for garnish, everything balanced. "If I have to serve," I whispered, "I'll serve like a queen." I moved through the crowd, offering appetizers to men in cufflinks and women in diamonds. They barely looked at me. I didn't care. The power of being invisible is you hear everything. Halfway through the evening, I heard the click of heels. A familiar gait. Vera. She swept in like she was walking onto a stage, hair perfectly curled, a strand of pearls at her neck. She didn't glance at me, just glided past, her perfume like an expensive lie. "My dear friends," she beamed to the hostess. "You're too fabulous." The host raised a glass. "To new beginnings, to healing," Vera toasted. I kept moving. Tray in hand, silent in my chest. Then it happened. Vera, reaching too far for a wineglass, knocked over her champagne. Red wine spilled across the tablecloth like a wound. A few guests gasped softly. I stepped forward, pulling a clean napkin from the serving tray. "Here," I said, handing it to her. She took it, eyes fixed on the stain. "Oh, thank you, dear." I didn't move. "You're welcome, Mama." The word hit like thunder, ringing through the delicate china plates. The room froze. She looked up, confused at first. Then recognition, slow and stunned. "Evania." I smiled, calm, unapologetic. "Still just a stain, right?" I set the empty tray on the table, turned, and walked straight out the door she'd come through. No one followed. The air didn't stir. The door closed softly behind me. The only sound in the world wasn't a slap. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. I walked past the tall hedges around the Whitmore estate like they were strangers. The night air smelled of magnolias and distance, thick and humid, but cleaner than the room I'd left. Back at the cottage, my phone buzzed. A text from Vera. "You've embarrassed yourself enough. Don't come back." I stared at it for a moment, not surprised, but because it was the fastest she'd ever replied to me in my life. I didn't respond. I didn't even breathe hard. I deleted it like someone brushing lint off a coat. Nothing to keep. Nothing left to say. Lazaro was home when I got there. He didn't ask questions, just poured tea, set the cup on the small table beside me, and sat quietly on the edge of the couch across the room. I was still standing when he finally spoke. "You asked who I am," he began. "I think you're ready now." He didn't say it with drama, just a quiet readiness, like he'd been waiting for this moment long before I knew it was coming. I sat down, letting the silence answer for me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "My last name isn't Denson," he started. I blinked. "What?" "It's Whitmore." Something shifted in my chest. Not panic, not betrayal, but a click like a puzzle piece falling into place. He went on, "My mother owns Whitmore Enterprises Furniture. Real estate, private equity. She wanted me to take it all." I said no. He didn't dramatize it. No bravado, no flourish, just facts. I started my own company. Small, quiet, sustainable. I didn't want her name on it. Didn't want mine either, so I used Denson, my uncle's name. I couldn't speak. The tea in my hands had gone cold. He looked at me carefully. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to test you. I just wanted to be with someone who didn't see a bank account." "And the others?" I finally asked. He shrugged. "They always wanted something, a position, a contract, a connection." His eyes softened. "You were the first who didn't ask for anything but peace, space, and maybe a little grace." I laughed quietly, a little bitter at the edges. Guess I failed at that tonight. He shook his head. "You didn't fail. You stood up." That's what most people never do. I sat back, still processing, and then I said it. The thing I didn't know I'd been holding. "Then it's time they hear my voice too." He looked up, surprised. I stood, walked to the small cabinet by the window, and pulled out the embroidered handkerchief. I folded it neatly, tucked it into my pocket. "I have something to say," I said. And this time I'm holding the mic. The next morning I was up early. The sky was still purple at dawn. I tied my hair back, opened my laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor. I didn't wait for a sign. I typed subject Whitmore Scholarship Fund. A statement from Ivana. I didn't hold back. I told the truth, not just about Vera, but about girls like me. Girls told to disappear, called stains. I wrote about my wedding, the cake without my name, the silences, the rooms I was present in but never seen. I named names carefully, calmly. I didn't slander. I documented. Then I listed 5 small community colleges and 10 rural schools with high dropout rates. I'm not your daughter. I'm your reminder. And I'll make sure you remember me through every girl you tried to forget. I hit send. My hands didn't shake. It took less than 2 weeks for things to change. After the email, the silence lasted days, long enough for me to wonder if I'd miscalculated. But then the messages started. Principals, reporters, former students. Some read every word. Some just saw the subject line, but they responded. And Lazaro did too. One evening, as the sun melted into the Savannah horizon, he handed me a navy blue envelope thicker than the others, the Whitmore crest embossed in gold. An invitation, formal, sleek. The annual Whitmore Foundation Gala, honoring legacy, elevating voices. Inside, my name wasn't at the bottom. It was at the top. Co-director. I looked at him. He smiled faintly. Yours. All of it. I took a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Then I got to work. By the night of the gala, Savannah sparkled in spring light. The event was at the Foresight Greenhouse, a glass dome glowing under string lights and soft chamber music. I stood outside the door a moment, hand on the handle, clutch gripped tight. Inside, the embroidered handkerchief sat neatly, no longer for comfort, but a reminder. I stepped in. The room hummed with velvet gowns, tuxedos, wine glasses raised mid-conversation. But as I moved, something shifted. Eyes followed, mouths murmured. I wasn't the girl ignored at parties anymore. I wasn't just a wife or a charity case. I was something else now, something they weren't ready for. At the far end of the room, Vera stood near the stage, her voice carrying through practiced laughter. She wore red as always, like she had to claim power before entering a room. She saw me for a split second and blinked quickly, turning back to her group. The announcement came minutes later. Lazaro stepped to the podium, polished in his charcoal suit. No notes, no script. I've quietly supported this foundation for years, he began. But tonight I want to introduce the person writing its next chapter. A pause. She's been called a mistake, a stain, a burden. But tonight she's holding the pen. He extended a hand. Ivania Whitmore. I didn't hesitate. I stepped onto the stage carrying the weight of every insult, every slight, every room I'd been erased from. Under my heels, but I didn't wear them. I stepped over them. The mic was cool under my fingers. The room stilled as I exhaled. I want to thank the people who never believed in me, I began. You made me sharper. You made me listen when silence could have drowned me. I scanned the room. My past doesn't vanish. It's stitched into me like thread through every dress I didn't choose. Every meal I served when I should have been seated. Someone in the back shifted uncomfortably. Another set down their glass. But I'm still here. For every girl told to stand in the back. For every daughter told to be silent, I want to say this. You belong where you choose to stand. The room stopped. Then erupted. Applause real and rising. People stood. Some clapped harder than others. It didn't matter. They were facing me now. As I stepped off the stage, Vera was waiting, arms crossed, chin high, voice sharp. So you came to flaunt your husband's money? I didn't flinch. I pulled the ring Lazaro gave me from my clutch, the one I hadn't worn publicly since the wedding. I slipped it on in front of her. I came to take back what was always mine. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. I walked past her. Before leaving the stage entirely, I paused, pulled the embroidered handkerchief from my clutch, and set it gently on the mic. I didn't need it anymore. And this time, as the stage lights followed, I didn't shrink. I woke before the birds, not because something was wrong, but because for the first time in my life, my body didn't brace for the day. No ache behind my eyes. No pit in my stomach. No rehearsing answers to questions. No one bothered to ask. Just quiet. Not the kind that presses on your chest, but the kind that breathes with you, the kind that says, "You're safe now." I stretched under the soft cotton sheets and listened. The wind outside stirred the trees gently. The kettle hissed. Lazaro was up humming in the kitchen. Off-key, but familiar. Like how some people misspell your name but still say they love you when they call it. I parted the curtains slightly. Sunlight slipped in like a warm hand. My eyes caught the small garden by the porch, where the tomato plants were starting to bear fruit. This isn't a fairy tale ending, I whispered to the quiet. It's better. It's mine. While Lazaro made breakfast, I walked to the oak table by the window. A stack of envelopes waited. Some were invitations, some congratulations, and one thinner bearing the seal of a university I hadn't thought of in years. Hand steady, I tore it open. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance to the part-time pre-med foundation program, spring term. My breath caught. I hadn't let myself hope. Not really. I'd applied as a dare, a quiet challenge to myself at 2A. One night after rereading old journals, they said I was too late, too old, too ordinary. But now I knew. I was never ordinary. I was just told to be silent. Lazaro came in with 2 cups of tea, one for him, dark and strong. One for me, lighter with honey. He glanced at the paper in my hand. That it? I nodded, the corner of my mouth inching up. Yeah. And then of course it buzzed. My phone usually tucked in the kitchen drawer. I picked it up, already feeling the weight from the other end before I saw the name. Vera. I stared at the screen long enough for it to stop buzzing, but it lit up again and again. This time I answered. Her voice came through thin, not just from the signal, but like it had traveled through too much pride, too many years of not listening. I heard your speech, she said, no greeting. I didn't know you could talk like that. I sipped my tea. I always could. You just never listened. Silence. I was wrong, she said finally. Not an apology. A confession. And for the first time, I didn't force myself to forgive. I didn't reach across the line she'd refused to cross my whole life. That's not my job to fix, I said. I chose to heal. Before she could respond, I ended the call. Not out of spite, but clarity. Some things don't need holding on to. Some burdens aren't yours. That afternoon, I packed a bag and drove to the campus. Orientation was a month away, but I wanted to see it. To touch the place I'd fought so hard to believe I deserved. Outside the building, students moved fast. Backpacks, lattes, earbuds. They looked young, half anxious, half hopeful. I stood there not trying to blend in, just breathing. A guy with a clipboard passed by, glanced at my tag, and grinned. Doctor. Whitmore. I smiled faintly. Not yet. He nodded. Yeah, but soon. I looked down at my hands, the rings still glinting in the afternoon light, but what steadied me wasn't the gold. It was the handkerchief folded neatly in my coat pocket. The one they gave me the day they meant to bury me. The one I carried when I chose to rise. It wasn't about them anymore. I walked toward the entrance steps, even shoulders square, because sometimes being told to be silent teaches you how to hear your own truth. They said I belonged at the bottom in the shadows behind the scenes. But I learned I belong where I choose to rise. And that's where the story begins.